Okay, so media recording is going. Excellent. Just for those then who are watching the recording later, just another quick recap there. We're going to be doing our first early literacy chat. This is on intentionality and story time. And I promise as I do this more often, I will get better at WebEx. All right, so we'll be going over just a couple of things today, talking about what it means to be intentional, what is intentionality, a quick refresher on the different components that make up early literacy, talking about the reading process, how children actually learn to read, and the different steps that are involved there, and some ways that you could then take this intentionality concept to transform your story time. And then at the end, we'll talk about the early literacy planning tool and the early literacy planning tool worksheet. I don't know if there's an easy way for me to send you these documents right now, but with this recording, we will be putting it on the State Library website, and I can have those two files there to download from that. And I can send that out to a link to the whole ACL listserv as well, especially if there was somebody who wanted to come today but couldn't because of scheduling conflicts. So, intentionality is connecting our storytime activities to the early literacy skills and development, being more aware of, being more planful, and articulating those connections during planning, during delivery of the story time, and through the reflection of the story time. To understand the importance of intentionality, it helps to have some information about what early literacy is and the formal process of reading. So early literacy is what children know about communication, language, both verbal and nonverbal communication, reading and writing before they're actually able to read and write. I'm sure you've all heard that plenty of times before. Early literacy encompasses all of a child's experiences with conversations, with stories, both oral and written, books, print, the written word, wherever they're encountering it. The different components that make up early literacy, or these pre-reading skills, are a foundation for this intentionality. And as we talk about the development of early literacy in children, we're going to be thinking about ways that we can connect elements from our story time intentionally to these different components. So, going through them pretty quickly, again, we've got oral language, the foundation for all language. We've got phonological awareness, which is that ability to hear the smaller sounds that make up our words. Print awareness, knowing that the print that we see in books, on signs, all around us has some sort of meaning. Letter knowledge, which is exploring letters, recognizing the different shapes that they have, knowing the different sounds that they make, how they work together to create a different sound. We've got our vocabulary, which is knowing the meaning of a wide variety of words. And last but not least, background knowledge, which is a child's prior knowledge about the world, which can include both like knowledge of different content and facts. It could be knowing their book and story knowledge and their narrative skills, how books work, all kinds of good things there. To see the connection between early literacy and later reading, we're going to first look at what literacy skills children need to be a successful reader when they're being formally taught how to read. And that happens, of course, kindergarten, first, second, maybe even parts of third grade is when they're really getting these skills underneath their belts. So, formally learning to read involves 3 key areas. So children must learn how to decode print, connecting letters to their different sounds, which also includes learning different sight words. Children need to understand or to comprehend what print says, and they need to be able to read fluently. So it's this ability to read a text accurately, quickly, and with expression also. So let's take a little quick look at what it is to decode. If I were to give you a sheet of paper that had these three symbols on it, would you be able to read it? Would you understand what these symbols mean? Probably not. But, thinking about it that way, children are learning all these different things, what our different symbols mean, symbols being our letters. If I were to then give you some more information, so the different sounds that these different squiggles make. So our first really angular one makes kind of a k sound. Our little bow friend in the middle is an ah. And then the extra weird shepherd's crook squiggle is a t, ah, t. Then we can understand that word means cat. So we were able to decode the symbols by matching those symbols to the sounds that they make and read the word. So we've now cracked the code, as it were. So in order for children to decode words, they need to notice print. First of all, that's that print awareness skill. Understand that the printed words that they see stand for a spoken word. They need to be able to understand how to follow words on the page. So English language, of course, we left to right, top to bottom. Other languages do it differently. They need to be able to hear and play with the different sounds that make up our words, that phonological awareness component. And they need to know the different letter names and sounds so that they can start sounding out the word. And that's, of course, that letter knowledge. The knowledge of letter names and the sounds and being able to break up words in different individual sounds, that phonological awareness, those two components, if children are strong with those two components, they are going to be, they say like it's a stronger predictor for being able to learn to read easier than if children are not as strong in those components. Comprehension is the second skill set needed for reading, and it's at the heart of what it really means to be a good reader. So if you look at this slide, and we have the phrase, Isabel is hipple when she roffs with her dad. What would we think these underlined words in this sentence would mean? If we don't know, like if we've never encountered the word hipple or roff before, then maybe we're able to make a guess based on context clues. We have a picture on this slide as well, and looks like there's a dad, and he has his daughter in his lap, and they have a book. So maybe that we can guess that hipple is happy and Ross is reading, because it looks like, the baby may not be super happy, but the dad looks happy, and they're reading a book together. So maybe they're happy when they read together. If our context clue is different, so here we have a different picture, and it still says Isabel is hipple when she romps with her dad, maybe we'd make a different guess. Maybe it's still happy, but instead of reading for Rofs, maybe Rofs means that she's walking or hiking with her dad. So, unless you 100% know the meaning of the word hipple or Rof, or any other new word if you were a child learning how to read, you can't really be sure exactly what the sentence means. So children are able to decode a word so they could sound it out and put it together, but without the comprehension, they're not necessarily understanding what it is that they're reading. So that's why when they're becoming good readers, they not only need to decode it, but they need to interpret the meaning, and that's this comprehension here. So to support comprehension, children need to have a good vocabulary. They need to know what words mean. They've encountered them before, and so they already have a pretty good idea. There's also that earlier component of background knowledge. So they know about the world. You and I know about the world because we're old fuddy-duddy grown-ups. So we see a smiling man and we think that means happy. We see a book. And what do you do with a book? Well, you read a book. You see a child in a backpack and they're out in the wilderness, so they're hiking, right? And this is based on our prior knowledge of the world. The third skill area for reading is fluency. So it's the ability to read a text accurately, quickly, with expression. It is a bridge, you like my little graphic there, a bridge built on word recognition and comprehension. You need both of those in order to be able to read fluently. According to the Views 2 study, when we are intentional around those early literacy components, we are going to increase children's early literacy behaviors. So let's look at intentionality and how we can be more intentional in our story times at our libraries. Intentionality involves knowing those early literacy components, being aware of what you do to support them, being more purposeful, and thinking of new ways to incorporate these early literacy components intentionally. It's about being mindful and planning your story time out, being purposeful about including the early literacy activities into your storytime delivery, and then reflecting back on your story times with regard to supporting early literacy development. It's about how we do things. An example of this would be, for instance, baking a delicious cake. And yes, when I searched for a graphic for this slide, I searched for the most delicious looking cake I could find, and I think that I did. So when it comes to baking a cake or other very light and fluffy baked goods, we have to beat up our eggs, right? You know what you do. You get a whisk or a fork, and crack the eggs into a bowl, and you start whipping them up. But once you learn more about the chemistry involved and the science behind baking, you can understand that the process there of whipping all your eggs together is about creating tiny little air bubbles. And then when your cake is in the oven, it's being heated, those bubbles started to expand, and that adds to the light texture, the fluffiness of the cake. So how you're beating those eggs makes a difference. You just sort of do a couple of quick stirs, you're not getting that air, and you end up with a flat, dense, meh cake, right? So your awareness of chemistry for baking leads to intentionality. And so here, your awareness of the different components of early literacy and how important they are to helping children learn to read and to succeed, it matters. And it's going to lead to a better result. What we want to emphasize here too is that this intentionality, or when they called it a supercharged story time in that previous training, it's not a recipe. There is not a strict rule about how to go about being more intentional, because there's lots of room in a library story time for creativity, doing things that make you happy or things that you like to do, different ways you can individualize it, make it more fun. So we already are talking, singing, reading, playing with kids in our story times, but this intentionality part is just to help make connections between things we're already doing or might be able to do, and really draw back to those components. So for example, if you're reading a book in story time, you might ask a simple question like, oh, do you see the bear on this page? And that's fine, but it provides less language than asking a question like, what's this bear doing? Or what does the bear look like? Or how do you think the bear is feeling right now? We might sing a song like Over in the Forest, and there are a couple words in that song that may not be familiar to the kids in your community. So snakes are slithering, elephants are lumbering. If we have kids act out these motions, it's going to help them make that connection in their minds of the new word and what it means. It doesn't have to be a big, huge change, right? So let's say, for instance, you've always run your finger under the words in the title when you are introducing a new book to read in Storytime. Running your finger under the text is going to bring children's attention to that text. It's going to help them to focus on text when they're learning to read. We're not doing anything differently by continuing to do that, but we've made the connection now, and so we're being a bit more intentional about it. You might want to make a small change. So if you want to help children learn the meaning of a word, so here we have the word moan. That might not be a word that they're very familiar with, but you can add a moaning sound or give a synonym like sigh or groan. And so with this addition of a sound or a few extra words, you're now going to be supporting children's vocabulary. You could make a big change too. You could add an activity to help emphasize a connection to early literacy. So rhyming is something that supports a child's phonological awareness, that hearing of the smaller sounds in the words. So in the story time, if you're reading again the same book, Llama Llama Red Pajama, there's lots of rhymes in this book. You might read the book all the way through and you can come back to a page that rhymes. You can point out to children that the words soon and tune sound alike, that they rhyme. You might be able to have them think of other words that rhyme with soon or tune, the word moon, for instance, something like that. And that's a bigger change. It adds more time to the book. Being intentional could also involve having a whole brand new idea. So a new idea could be after you have read this book with the kiddos, you are incorporating some kind of rhyming activity. So this could be having kids draw a picture about what they do when they're getting ready for bed or going to sleep. And that's something that can support background knowledge. It's connecting what's happening in the book to their real life situation. So you can use any early literacy structure to be intentional. The components that we've talked about today come from Every Child Ready to Read. There are plenty of other different ones that you can go by. There's Head Start domains, there's the Alaska Early Learning Guidelines, all kinds. But no matter what structure you use, the skills in them are pretty much the same, no matter how they're organized or if they're called something slightly different. And of course, you can be intentional with any of these kinds of structures. So something that I'm highlighting here today for you is the Early Literacy Planning Tool, again, based off of that Every Child Ready to Read. It was created by Saroj Goding, and it can help you to become more intentional in your story times. It can help you recognize if there's things here that you are already doing, how they are connected to a certain component. It can help you to expand what you do and to be more aware of ways that you could help scaffold or adapt what you're doing, especially if you're doing like a family story time. There's lots of different ages and stages attending. You can sort of adapt whatever type of thing you're doing to meet everyone's needs developmentally. It's a pretty long document, it's about 14 pages or so, but it does go through all 6 of those components mentioned earlier, and it is arranged by age level. So it starts, you can see that birth to 18 months, and it goes all the way up to age 5. Intentionality and planning go hand in hand. So it's about planning how you can be more intentional in your story times. Take a second and just think about how much time you currently have to plan your story times. It might be a whole week. It might only be a day or an hour, or you have 10 minutes, or you say to yourself, I have no time, not at all. What are you even talking about? And there's no wrong answer. There's no judgment. I've totally been there where you've just got to do what you've got to do. And no matter how experienced any of us are at doing a story time, sometimes there's just a challenging day and there isn't any time left. But if you have even 10 minutes, you can start to think about ways you can be more intentional. And as a companion to the early literacy planning tool, Saroj also has created this early literacy planning tool worksheet. And it allows you to focus in. You can just pick one early literacy component, select some kind of item or activity that you can do to support that component in your story time. You can break it down by age range and think about if it's going to be a book that you'll use, or a song, or a flannel board, or do some kind of craft, and what it is with that item that is supporting the component. You don't have to use this kind of a tool if you don't want to. Obviously, I can't show up at your library and check and make sure you've done it. And of course, everyone's type of planning is different. I know I like to have things written out, ready to go, and I know some librarians just like to do it off the cuff. It's whatever works for you, whatever you feel comfortable doing, whatever makes you feel confident. I know that some people don't want to take the spontaneity out of things, and they worry that a worksheet like this could do that. But I would encourage everybody, no matter what your style, just to give it a try, maybe a couple of times, and just to see if it's something that might help you. And remember, of course, that many of the things that are on that planning tool are things that you're already doing. And so what's helpful then is just to think to yourself, I've already been doing that. And this is why. Now you know why with that intentionality. And rather than planning your story time around a specific early literacy component, thinking to yourself, today's story time is going to just be a vocabulary story time. Why don't you just, I would encourage you just to start with a book or a song, something that you like. Story times are full of opportunities to support early literacy. This frees us to choose books and different activities that we love and that children will love too. Because if we're having fun, it's more likely that they will have fun. So the planning tool and the worksheet can help you be more intentional around opportunities for early literacy, but it's how you're using your book, song, or other item that helps it support an early literacy component. Your intentionality will help you to make connections between your storytime items, what you're doing, how you're doing it, and ways to support early literacy in joyful, happy ways. And that is what's going to supercharge your story times. Again, a big thank you to Saroj Goding for the content of this little presentation here. It was adapted pretty liberally from that Supercharged Storytimes for All class. If you've got any questions that you wanted to ask me, you can shout them out. You can put them in the chat. If you want to talk about something that you've been doing at your library and share with other folks, I would really encourage you to do that as well. And the next early literacy chat that we'll be doing is going to be in April. It's going to be a month break, and it's going to be about early literacy play spaces. So do be out on the lookout for that one. I'm sending an email out to the ACCA listserv. But yes, if you have anything you'd like to ask me right now, please go ahead. Or go ahead and share with the group something that you either have done or might want to do in the future. And if you have to leave, that's fine too. Thanks very much. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samantha. I appreciate it. This is James.
Thank you. You guys have a good day.